I think individuals, companies around the world have become very used to low interest rates, and we're going through a painful transition, a reckoning, if you like, that interest rates, debt servicing costs are not going to be as low as they used to be, and that can be quite a shock for households and companies, and that's why we are forecasting recessions in many major economies: the US, Europe, Japan, Australia, Canada, South Korea next year. One other thing I'd point out is when you have many economies weakening, you can't rely on exports for growth. And that's another reason why we think this recession risk is very real and will likely happen now.
You mentioned a country that I did want to ask you about, because Japan is one where you're seeing the reverse of all of these, I suppose, monetary conditions. So is Japan at risk of recession, not from the ultra easy monetary settings or anything internally, or is it because of, if you do see recessions everywhere else, that they're just going to get caught up in the crossfire?
It's exactly that. They're more caught up in the crossfire. So the Japan recession is mainly caused by weaker external demand. And it's a very, very mild recession. Well, it's -0.1, -0.1. So it's a technical recession we have. It's also mild because Japan's one of the last countries to come out of the pandemic. It's only now reopening. And so that's going to be an offsetting tailwind. But nonetheless, we now are forecasting Japan to be in a mild technical recession starting late this year.
All right, well, let's get on to the big one, Rob, and that's the US. You're expecting a recession there. Tell us what's the probability of that recession, what kind of depth of that recession is going to come along, and when it does come, what's the reaction of the central bank going to be? Are we going to see Powell about turn and bring rates down again?
So probability, it's our base case, Timur. So our baseline view now is the US will fall into recession, so negative quarter-on-quarter GDP growth starting in Q4 this year. And it's going to be a shallow recession, but a long one. We have it lasting for 5 quarters in a row. So Q4 this year all the way through to Q4 next year, GDP will be contracting quarter-on-quarter. The Fed we have will be tightening into this recession, and that's because we see inflation as being sticky. It's going to stay high. It's going to be hard to get down. And so we have the Fed hiking 75 in July and then 50 at the next meeting, and then a series of 25s until it gets the Fed funds rate at 3.75% by February next year. And we think at that point, growth will be clearly slowing and inflation will be coming off, and that will allow the Fed to pause. But then as we get later into next year and inflation comes down more visibly towards the Fed's target of 2%, the Fed will start cutting. So September, we have the Fed starting to cut, and we have 3 25 basis point cuts in the latter quarter of 2023. So we get the Fed's funds rate back down to around 3% by the end of next year from a peak of 3.75. And importantly, we have the Fed continuing to cut in 2024.